You gave us 6 takeaways when you spoke to us a couple weeks ago. All of them are fantastic. All of them we could talk about for hours. The 6 are, what is the state of my marriage and my relationship with my kids? And reflect on that. Choose connection, which we just talked about, right? Having that tribe of men. Choose freedom, primarily financial freedom. Choose healing and health. Choose mindfulness. And then finally, choose to believe. I want to hear about all those, but most importantly, and as I'm sure you can appreciate, the most important is belief, faith in God, faith in Jesus. So talk to me a little bit more about your relationship from a faith perspective, how you came to it, and why it's so important to you.
I grew up in a conservative Christian home, and it wasn't conservative politically back then. It just meant we went to Sunday school. I was in church 3 days a week growing up, or 3 times a week, Sunday morning, Sunday evening, and Wednesday night. And I had a group of feral buddies that we were in punk rock clubs and doing that, but I also had a youth group community so I had good friends. And that was just it was just the air we breathed. I didn't know any different. And I'll say this, my dad, to his credit, he quit being a police officer about halfway through my childhood and took over taking care of the youth. A youth minister or youth pastor wasn't a real job back then, but he was this first wave. And he took over this 200 plus kid and all the parents youth group. And so he became a minister halfway through my childhood. And I learned very early on, just because the theology of the building you walk into every Sunday is stamped on the front door doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean it's not worth being questioned. And so I always had permission, and this is high credit to my parents. I always had permission to ask hard questions and my mom went back to college really, really late. Her first community college class was at the age of 42. But she became a mythology professor and she taught at a faith-based university. My mom was the first one to tell me, hey, there's 20,000 different cultural flood narratives across all different faiths and cultures and beliefs. And I was like, well, why do you believe this one? And she smiled and goes, that's the challenge, isn't it? And so I had parents that were always saying, hey, don't just take what somebody on a pulpit says, or don't just take what a Sunday school teacher says, ask hard questions. And that permission, I spent years just worshiping science. I wanted to know every nuance and every therapeutic modality. And in my limited way, I got to the end of where science could give me answers. I spent years I wouldn't say I was an atheist. I was agnostic. I didn't believe any of the stories anymore, but I wasn't out proselytizing. And here's what's weird. I still went to church because I knew the science said guys who go to church have better marriages, have better lives. And it was good to go into a building, sing songs with people, right? So the practices I kept up. And then I think it was when I had my own mental health crisis, if you will. And then I joined the police department. I was a dean of students at a law school, and I started working with police officers after hours doing death notifications and sitting with hurting people. And strangely, that's often what takes people away from faith. That's what brought me back, because it ended the answers. There's no right answer when you're sitting with a mother who just lost her 4-year-old kid. There's no answers when you're sitting with a wife whose husband just died. And it was in that silence and in that holy space, in that presence, if you will, that I began to exhale into something bigger than me. And Jesus isn't about don't drink and don't chew and don't go with girls that do. It's way deeper. There's this anchoring, kind of like I was talking about every day of my son's life. He knows that his dad loves him. There was this anchoring that I had always been attached to, but I had tethered way off the side of that cliff. And so now faith practice is less about a series of X, Y, and Z's for me, or you have to do this, or faith practice is air for me. It is the root. It's the roots of the tree. They say like if you see a tree, like 2/3 or 2 times that is underground, that's my faith. And I care a lot more about, there's a lot of arguing about, I'll use a tree metaphor. What fertilizer are you using? What kind of sunlight are you giving that tree? I don't care about any of that stuff. I want to see the fruit at the end of that tree. And if you don't have patience, if you don't have kindness, if you don't seek justice, if you don't have joy, if you're not able to put your head on your pillow at night, then I'm going to challenge whatever you're trying to do to express this belief in something bigger than yourself. It's not expressed in you announcing all the things you're doing. It's expressed in what's the fruit at the end of those branches. And I'm way more interested in that. If somebody comes at me screaming and frothing at the mouth about Jesus and about God and their belief, if somebody walks into a room, a chaotic room, and they exhale and they say, "Come sit down with me," that's fruit at the end of that tree.
My guys group 2 years ago, they started prodding me, right? Just come to church with us. I'd never been before. Never thought it was even something necessary. And it has completely changed me, John, and given me a purpose for life. There's more to this world than just getting up every day and doing the thing. If you can see that deeper purpose down in that ground, that foundation, as you said, it'll change you.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're probably at the tail end of this ideal, but all of the psychological theories, if you will, in some shape, form, or fashion, had this idea of self-actualization. There's a point when you get to the top of the lighthouse. Right now, the path is discipline, crush it, kill it, like do all these things. I listen to Jocko. I love Jocko. I've done events with him. But there's this idea that you can become the tip of the spear of your life, that ultimately everything revolves around you. I think we are proving to ourselves, look, like we're more self-actualized than we've ever been in human history. We have more access to anything we want. And we're realizing the self can't hold. That was never the point. And so I am going to be disciplined. I am going to be a good steward of my body. I'm going to be a good steward of my resources, not be so that I can have some imaginary number in a checking account, but so that I can be about peace in my home, peace in my community. I can provide that cup of cold water to somebody. And it's asking yourself, why am I doing all these things? And if you're doing it to make a better version of you, and that's the period at the end of the sentence, it will be a hollow victory. If you exercise so that you can roll around with your grandkids in 40 years, if you exercise so that when your neighbor calls and says, "Hey, I need help with the drywall in my house and we don't have any money," and my elderly mother who's a widow is moving in, and I can go, "I'll be there. I'll work all night with you." That's why we're doing these things. And that is Christ expressed in everything, right? I meditate, I pray every morning so that when somebody calls me and says, "You didn't respond on social media to this tragedy in the right way, you didn't," I can exhale and say, "Hey man, come pull up a seat," because I'm not reactive, right? Because I'm rooted in something deeper. And that to me is the beauty of showing up on a Sunday morning and just looking around and going, "Oh, y'all too?" It's a hospital. It's not an opera theater. It's a hospital. That's what church is every Sunday. And so I'm glad you found that peace, man. That's amazing.
Thank you.